3,200 startups failed in 2023, according to a recent article by TechCrunch, and unfortunately, Oqire, my startup, was one of them. So in this video, I want to kind of run through the top 3 reasons why I believed Oqire failed, so that potentially you can learn some of the lessons from me rather than on your own startup. So for those of you who weren't aware or haven't followed my journey, Oqire was a SaaS application built specifically for sales and pre-sales teams selling enterprise-grade software. It was designed to help streamline the discovery and product demonstration process, ultimately to increase deal velocity and the number or volume of deals won. So, as I said, I want to cover the top 3 reasons why I believe Oqire failed. I mean, ultimately, it rests on my shoulder. I was the solo founder of Oqire. I built a large majority of the product as well, because I do. I'm both a non-technical and a technical founder. If you've watched any of my previous videos, you'll know I started my journey as a non-tech founder, and over the last couple of years have learned how to code. So I built the initial version of the product and then brought on a developer on a contract basis to help accelerate development. But ultimately, at the end of the day, what transpired with Oqire rests on my shoulders. So none of this is really meant to be an excuse. It's just, since closing Oqire, or deciding to close Oqire in late 2023, I really sat down and reflected on the process and tried to uncover and understand, potentially why Oqire ultimately failed and what could have been done differently. So I think the number one thing that I've learnt and believe contributed to the failure of Oqire is that changing behavior is extremely hard. So what I mean by that is I spoke to a huge number of people who are in sales and who are in pre-sales and responsible for conducting discovery sessions with potential customers, putting together their requirements, and then doing product demonstrations. And they all agreed that that process wasn't optimal and that it was often broken within their organization. However, what I kind of failed to appreciate was just the sheer amount of effort required to change behavior within an organization. So what I mean by that is, all of these individuals had their own way that they'd kind of figured out of managing this process. For some people, it was writing some notes in a Word doc. For other people, there was no process, and that was their process. It was kind of like, let's just wing it and hope for the best. For other people, they had some notes that they might capture in their CRM, or they would jot them down in an email. And again, when you look at that from the outside, like I did, in my experience as a pre-sales consultant and as a salesperson, that's not optimal. It's not structured. You're not saving the information that can be leveraged in future opportunities. There's no way to collaborate on it easily in a lot of situations. And if you approach it from a logical point of view, hey, wouldn't it make sense that the sales and the pre-sales team come together, that they make sure they ask the right questions, that we understand the customer's problems, that we use those problems to then put together a much better product demonstration? All of that makes logical sense. And everyone that we spoke to, both from small companies and large companies, agreed, logically, that is what we should be doing. Actually doing it, much different story. I kind of relate it to, people who are perhaps overweight or out of shape and they want to get better. Everyone ultimately knows how to solve that issue. You need to eat better and move more. Yet actually doing it is a fundamentally different thing. And I think that that's something that was hard for us to crack. We spoke with both smaller companies, potentially, 3 or 4 or 5 people in their sales and pre-sales team. And for them, it was kind of like, hey, the team's so small, we just keep it in our head. And yes, we can see the benefit of using a tool like Oqire, but everything's moving so fast, we're doing this, and this, we'll think about it later kind of thing. Then on the other side of the spectrum, you speak to a company that's a bit larger, maybe they've got 50 salespeople and 5 or 6 pre-sales consultants, and they're kind of already too far down the track of, we're kind of doing these ad hoc processes. To try and change an entire team would be too hard. So we're trying to find our sweet spot of that right-sized company that was big enough to care about process, but small enough that they could implement change. And unfortunately, we just never found them. So that's kind of, I guess, the number one reason I think Oqire failed. Changing behavior is hard. Tangentially related to that, but number two, I did want to separate this out, is that we couldn't provide value to an individual user. And because of that, getting some initial traction with one person was hard. What I mean by that is, if you contrast Oqire to a tool like Notion or Canva, if you're familiar with those, yes, they provide a lot of value if you use those tools within a team. For example, Notion, task management, project management, it's obviously better, from a team perspective to have everything in one location. It's easy to use. You get all these additional benefits of collaboration, communication, keeping everything up to date, people on track, etc. But you can still use that tool as an individual, even if it's like a subset of their features, right? You can have your own to-do list in Notion. You can jot down some notes yourself in Notion. And with Oqire, while you could do that, you could kind of upload your own opportunity as a pre-sales consultant. You could put all your notes in there. There wasn't enough value for you as an individual user, right? Like, you really needed your salesperson, your pre-sales person, and ideally your sales manager all working in the tool to really understand the value, or to get value from Oqire. Like, one of the core features that we had and people really legitimately liked was that over time, as you managed opportunities in Oqire, if you then went to create a new opportunity and say it was selling, a CRM in the insurance sector, Oqire would be able to surface to you, hey, when you've sold in this industry before, 9 times out of 10, you've lost to this other competitor. And therefore, as a sales or pre-sales person, you might want to reconsider how you approach this opportunity. What's fundamentally changed from the other 9 times you lost to now to give you a greater chance of success? Is your product better? Has your pricing changed? Is there some other reason why going after this customer in this industry makes sense now? Or is it an opportunity that we should qualify out of? So that's where the value of having multiple users leveraging Oqire really kind of shone through. But as an individual, you can't get that value. And I know that's kind of tangentially related to problem one, that changing behavior. But I still think if we'd maybe considered that day one, were there some product changes we could have made that would have allowed an individual to get more value out of it, even if they just were using it themselves? And then while we might not necessarily have got 5, 10, 15, 20 people teams signing up, getting one user to use the tool and getting some revenue in the door, maybe that would have changed how we thought about the tool and some of the initial traction we got. The third reason is perhaps the most surprising and disappointing to me, and that is that I couldn't for the life of me get our content marketing strategy to work. And I know some people hearing this might be like, oh, well, you don't know what you're doing. Like, you made all these mistakes with that. Maybe you weren't doing it right, etc. And obviously I wasn't doing it right, because otherwise it would have succeeded. But to take half a step back and to give some context to my statement there, with one of my previous startups, Task Pigeon, which did get paying customers. I ran it for 5 years. It didn't reach any massive heights, but we were able to sell that. Another investor bought it. They rebranded it to Taskly Hub. But I did create some value there. And because the price point of Task Pigeon was it was a freemium tool, so it was free, or $9 per user, much lower, I couldn't rely on paid acquisition channels, like paid ads on Facebook or LinkedIn to get our users. So I invested very heavily in content marketing, and I wrote a huge number of blog posts over that time. And this is before AI, content generation, because this is probably 7 years ago now. But through that strategy, I grew our blog and our website to get more than 500,000 visitors a year. And that was just me as an individual. Like, I didn't have this massive team behind me. I outsourced some blog posts, but I did the majority of the writing myself. So with me as one user or one marketer, content marketer, I saw the success of content marketing, and I saw how it could deliver a huge amount of traffic if you invested it over time. So I took that same approach with Oqire. I was like, all right, let's create relevant content that's valuable for our audience. And I know it's not, day one you see results from blog posts, but I consistently did content marketing for 12 months on Oqire, and it just never seemed to cut through. Like, we didn't have a single article that got any significant traction. And in fact, in Google Search Console, since kind of stopping Oqire at the back end of 2023, I've actually seen the number of pages indexed by Google drop from like 115, 120 down to 60. It's just like bizarrely, fallen even more off a cliff, and we just couldn't get traction or traffic even as a starting point. And again, that's really on me. I'm not exactly sure where and how I went wrong with SEO this time. I did all of the same steps that I used to. Again, valuable content that's relevant for the user, targeting lower competition keywords, as well as some medium competition, just to keep it, to make sure we're providing value, even if that content might not necessarily rank as easily as some of the other content. Partly or potentially, it could have been because I did use AI this time. So one of the experiments that I'm running now that I've closed down Oqire is just testing out on a fresh domain. Like, can you get, fully AI written content to rank? I want to understand that more. Potentially, it's because the search volume for keywords around pre-sales and sales engineering, there's not as high a volume of traffic. That could be one of the reasons. Or maybe for actually, sorry, I've forgotten the main point that I wanted to mention here, and it's just come to my mind. One of the main things that I'm not really sure of is that Oqire was an expired domain. I purchased it because I really liked the name Oqire, and I really wanted a short, snappy name and a .com at that for whatever business it was that I was going to launch. I found Oqire and really thought that it fitted in well with the target market we were going after. A bit of a spin on acquire, as in acquiring customers, Oqire. So that's why I chose it. But I do know many years ago it was a bit of a spammy site. And everything that I read was like, Google doesn't care about that anymore. They can tell that those backlinks are junk and they just kind of ignore them. And then if you create enough new content, the start, might be a little bit harder, but eventually Google will cotton on to the fact that, this is a legitimate site. And I disavowed all of the old spammy links and everything in Search Console. So yeah, like that could also have been one of the main reasons. But look, I want to cut it there. 3,200 startups failed in 2023, according to an article by TechCrunch. And Oqire was one of them. So if you followed on my journey, obviously it didn't end the way I wanted it to. But I do know that eventually one day I will be back and I will do something else because I do love building, I love creating, I love startups. So stay tuned to the channel. Eventually something else will come out and you might want to follow along with that journey. Thanks for watching.